As you can tell, things are going to be a little bit different this morning. What we are talking about, this is going to be our second installment on a sermon, a two-sermon series on renewal inside of marriage, made new, having marriages that have been made new. And you might say, well, my marriage is fine, and that's good. We're celebrating with that. You might say, well, mine is over. Well, maybe not. Hold up. Wait just a minute. Maybe we got a chance here. So what we want to talk about is we want to talk about marriage. We're going to have a panel discussion here in just a minute. But I want to set the stage for how this conversation must take place. I need you to understand that a successful marriage, any successful relationship, and let me just say this, if marriage is not your thing, let me be very honest. Everything we teach you about having a successful marriage is true in every other relationship in your life. Because marriage in the end is nothing but a highly intense, never-ending relationship. And it's intense and never-ending because you marry till death do us part, and it's intense because you're together all the time. That's pretty intense. All right, so marriage is just a very intense, never-ending relationship. Therefore, the truths we have for any relationship, the marriage relationship, work in any other relationship. Your relationship with your siblings, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your coworkers, your relationship with your friends, your relationship with your community. All of these things work the same way. And I just want to say, I'm going to get in trouble for this, I think, but I'm going to say it anyway. Relationships are not complicated, but they are not easy. I know. The answer, how's your marriage doing? Well, it's complicated. I know that's how we answer. It's really not complicated so much as it's difficult. And it takes a long time. And it takes a lot of work. Marriage, look, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but here's what I want to do. Relationships, good ones, are not all that different from cooking a great steak. Some of y'all are like, I don't know where this is going. A great steak does not require a lot of ingredients. Let me be very honest with you. A great steak should require nothing more than salt and pepper. And some people argue you don't need that. But there are some steps you have to take. You have to handle it right. Can I tell you where a great marriage starts? Can I tell you where a great steak starts? Choosing the right steak. I was splitting wood in my backyard with Curtis Honeycutt one time, and I pulled out a log and wham, hit it with the axe. It just falls apart. You know, there's one, guys, you know that wonderful moment when you hit a log with an axe and it just flies apart, and you're going to, yeah, that happened, and I did it again, and he said, you're good at this. I said, you know what you got to know how to do to be good at splitting wood? He said, what? You got to be good at choosing a log. You want a great steak, you got to be good at choosing a steak. You want a great relationship, you need to be good at choosing, y'all. How many times in my career have I said, when you are shopping for a spouse, do not shop at Walmart, go to Macy's. Some of y'all been shopping at the dollar store. And by the way, when we're talking about dating practices, you know what I'm talking about. All right? You got to start there. But then there's this process of understanding how long to cook on one side and how long to cook on another side and get it to exactly the right temperature, let it rest for a minute. You say, once you get a good steak, what you can put any topping on it you want at that point. You can put nothing on it you want at that point. None of that matters if you take care of the first part right. You say, what in the world, Pastor, does this have to do with marriage? Marriage, I can teach you, I can give you the tools you need to have a great relationship and a great marriage with 3 words. Okay? Some of you don't believe me, but I can. 3 words. Remember, it's not that complicated, but it's not easy. It's not the words. You'll understand the words. You'll walk out of here being able to repeat them and memorize them. It's applying them. Here's the 3 words. You ready? Get out your pencil. Come on, y'all. I don't see nobody writing yet. I'm about to change your life. Here's your 3 words. Mutual, voluntary submission. I didn't drop it because I have to pay for it. Mutual, voluntary submission. Has to be mutual. There's 2 people involved. Has to be voluntary. You can't go buy one. But it requires submission. So, well, where do you even get this? Don't you need to use some Bible? Well, let's use some Bible. Let's just work on that. I pulled up a verse here. All right, everybody, if you got your Bibles or you got your devices, I want you to go to Ephesians chapter 5. And some of you already know where I'm going, and some of the ladies in the room are going, oh, come on. Stay with me. Stay with me. This is going to work for you. All right? Ephesians chapter 5. I'm going to start reading verse 20. Look at what the Apostle Paul says. The Apostle Paul says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. You could drop the mic again. There it is. Mutual, voluntary submission. Submit to one another. And then it's got this verse that women want to cut out of the Bible. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord, for the husband is the head of wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands and everything. And everybody wants to get rid of that verse. And you know why they want to get rid of that verse? Because they don't keep reading. If you got to get rid of that verse, you got to get rid of the rest of the passage. And ladies, trust me, you don't want to get rid of the next part. Because the next part says, husbands, by the way, did you see how long I read? When we talk about the ladies? Watch this. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church. For we are members of one body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you should also love your wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Did you see how long I read about the guys? Everybody freaks out about the girls' verse, but forgets the fact that there's all this stuff to the dudes. Dudes. And can I tell you, I heard a guy preach one time. Great guy, brilliant guy. But he said, I don't see any submission in this verse for the guys. And I'm looking at him going, you're brilliant, that's stupid. You're not listening to the verse. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Jesus, who had the authority to simply wipe out humanity had he chosen to, who had the authority to say, you guys have screwed this up and just delete us from history, instead chose to come and not even chose to come and demand and make himself king over us, but chose to come and be a sacrifice. The God of the universe chose to crawl up on a cross to show how much he loved a broken humanity. This is the level of love that God calls a husband to. And if you don't see submission in that, you're not paying attention. There is submission in that. But there's a submission that is respected. Husbands must love their wives, last verse in the chapter, and wives must respect their husbands. Now, let me tell you something brilliant. What happened was a single apostle from 2,000 years ago laid out what modern philosophy, what modern psychology will tell us is the greatest general need of men and women inside of a relationship. In general, and I'm generalizing, everybody stay with me, but in general, men need to be respected. And if men don't feel respected, they will act out like boys. In general, women need to feel cherished. And if they don't feel cherished and protected, they will go seek out someone who will cherish and protect them. I know I'm saying things that are very blunt and very clear, but can I say something? This is not complicated, but it's not easy. How do you respect someone in a tough time? How do you cherish in difficult days? Those are the questions we want to wrestle with. We want to wrestle with the question, what does mutual voluntary submission look like at different stages of our marriages and in different settings and different situations in our marriages? So in order to do that, we're going to have a panel discussion. So we have not truly practiced this. Everybody so far knows which mic to pick up and knows which chair to sit in. That's pretty much it. So I want you to greet some folks. I'm going to introduce them in order. I want you to greet, they have been married for almost 6 years. Next month will be 6 years. And I want you to greet Pastor Theo and his wife Silvana as they come out. Having been married for just right at, literally, they just had their 17th wedding anniversary. I want you to greet Pastor Dave and Casey Sylvain, who are coming out. And then would you give a really warm greeting to my smoking hot wife, Tina. She's coming out now. Thank you. All right. Hey, guys. Everybody ready for this? Oh, wow, that front of that chair wants to fall. I'm going to fall. So I can't hold that. So mic drop, water drop. All right, so here's what we want to do. I want to start it with a question. Let's start it with let me throw one that I think will fit this space and fit a lot of folks here. We are, Pastor Dave, Pastor Theo, and I, called to ministry. There was a call that called us into ministry. God said, you're going to do this, and that meant we were going to move places. That meant we were going to go. None of the three of us are from here. We all left where we were from to come here. But here's the challenge. They had to come with us. So what does mutual voluntary submission look like when God calls one spouse into ministry, but the other spouse is attached to them? Now, by the way, it's not just ministry. This would be true if one of you has a call to the military. This would be true if one of you has a call to any number of different occupations. You may find that what your spouse has been called to forces you to make some choices. What are you going to do that? What does mutual voluntary submission look like in that case? So let's go to the ones that wrestled with this most recently. And I'll just toss it to the children. I'm sorry, to to Theo and Silvana. By the way, Tina and I will celebrate 35 years in July, so you've got the whole gamut here. All right, so let me toss it to you guys.
Yeah, well, especially for us, I know even within ministry, there are different jobs, there are different levels of commitment within ministry. So the first big decision that we had to make was obviously moving here. And I know Theo was wrestling between two different jobs, and it was kind of his decision to make at this point as far as where God was leading him. And I was ready to get out of Delaware. So I was like, sure, whatever you want to choose. I mean, that's fine. But I think that for me, for that decision, it really was God kind of preparing to push me out of the state in general and move on to a different area, a different group of people. And so that one I felt very ready for and very open to. And then, of course, within New Life, positions change quickly. People are, shifting to different areas that they're called to because I don't feel like you're just called to one thing your entire life. You're called to serve God, and then you answer him however he defines that. And so when he was transitioning from being worship leader into more of a pastoral role. Obviously, that was going to demand more of his time. It was going to change how his hours looked like, how his studying at home looked like, and what preparation would look like for him in general. And so for a calling like that, especially when we were starting to have kids, that one felt a little more difficult for me because now it was time for me to make the decision of would I be home with Brooklyn and now this next one, how are we going to navigate balancing the family as well as his new calling? And I'm very thankful that I feel like God has just made it easy for me so far to just say yes to these transitions, but it doesn't mean that the actual transitions have been easy. So the yes is easy, but the day-to-day has definitely changed as far as being home with Brooklyn full-time now. Some days are easy, some days are not easy. And so it has been a really interesting but fruitful, I would say, transition to and a blessing to be home with our daughter, and home with this next one is the plan now, and just be more of the traditional roles in our family of, I'm at home with the kids and pretending I can cook, and and he is out here, spending a lot of his time preparing what God has to say. And so it's been great and hard and easy. It's all of it at once.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons why she said it's been kind of easy for her is because she's a relatively easygoing person. And I realized that when we were dating, that she was relatively easygoing and she bounces back really quickly, which was really cool to see. But what I had to learn is that that means having a lot of conversations in order to not take advantage of that. And so with all the changes, we got married, and within the first year, we moved after, I think, 9 months in one house, or it's like 7 or 8 months in one house, and then 9 months in another. After the 9 months in the second house is when God called us here. So there's all these changes taking place, and I had to learn that I needed to talk to her and get her opinion, get her feelings on it, because, while she has no problem saying yes and adjusting and bouncing back, I need to make sure that she's actually on board with this. And so I'm a firm believer that God doesn't just, specifically call one, meaning he's not going to call me and she hates the idea and can't stand it. And, well, God didn't tell me this. So if there comes that moment in the conversation, well, now I need to figure out, am I hearing God correctly? Or we need to figure out, is she hearing God correctly, or is she not hearing God in this moment? Or am I not hearing God in this moment? There's all these different things that take place, but I had to learn to have the conversation of, hey, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking. I'm going to toss it to you. You pray on it, think on it for a while, and then we'll talk about it later.
So that's actually huge, is learning to understand how your spouse processes a given idea, because you may need to come in and that you might hear a yes. It might seem like it's going your way, but you didn't dig into what is that. That's good. That's good. What about you guys? How'd you deal with that?
We've transitioned a lot, and Dave's been called to many things, I feel like. And so for us, it also brought 3 kids with it, and that means leaving a family. So we left family when all 3 of our kids were very little. And so I was where Silvana is now, I was there. And processing a move and a calling and a new life in ministry with 3 children, but also trying to deal with myself, because I want to be a help to him. I want to help him transition well, was very difficult and still can be difficult when he changes direction. So for me as a wife, I have learned over the years, I have to make sure that I'm okay to be able to help him. So I have to do things for myself. I have to take care of myself. It's not easy. There are times where I don't do that well, but that can look like going to a counselor. That could look like calling a best friend. That could look like taking a drive by myself with no children and no music in the car. Like, just making sure that I set those things to make sure I'm okay, for him to be okay, for them to be okay, for everything to kind of be okay.
Yeah, and it's not all you. I think somebody was hearing that in the audience, like, man, Casey's putting a lot on herself. It's first of all, what Theo said is true, and it's got to be something that we both determine that God's calling us to do, and that each of us may have the traditional roles, or we might have very different roles, and that those roles are okay as long as we both agree on those roles. Does that make sense? So it might look like, for a season, Casey takes care of the kids. And she wanted that. That's something that was a goal from very young age. I want to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to be with the kids. I want to take care of the kids. But that doesn't mean that I just don't do anything with the kids, or that I don't help take care of things around the house, or whatever it is that she needs. And it's not just like my call is the only call here. That you have a call, and that call might also involve something God said to you. It might involve something here at the church. It might involve a vocation. It might involve something that you need to go and do that means I have to sacrifice something that I want to do.
Yeah, and we've been there. I transitioned out of staying home with kids to be a worship director. So I took over a whole worship department. So that drastically changed what our life looked like. I had to work. I had to go to work from 8 to 2. I was very blessed that I could get out and do the afternoon run with our children. But that meant in the morning, sometimes he had to stay home from work and help them get to school and help them take them to the doctor, take them to the dentist. So we did flip-flop. And it took a little bit to figure out that transition, but you do that because that's what you do for each other.
Yeah.
You ebb and flow as each other changes.
Yeah, there turns out there's only one thing that I can't do in this relationship. Make babies. So when we decided that we wanted to do that...
I've heard you try to sing. That doesn't work either.
I forgot about that one. Touche. When we decided that that was a value that we wanted to share, that we wanted to do that, it was pretty clear she was going to be the one to have the babies. So that made the decision easy that she would have to do that. But the timing, God had other plans for our timing, so that meant that the dreams and the calling that she had for worship, unfortunately, because we got pregnant so early with our firstborn Noah, she had to put that on hold because of the circumstance, the situation. It wasn't either of our desire for her to put it on hold, but there were competing things, and it killed me a little bit. I died a little bit inside watching her have to sit that thing and put it on the shelf because, y'all, she's amazing at that. That's like, I've been telling Mike Pesh for years, y'all know Mike, I've been telling Mike that Casey does worship leading better than I do anything in my life. I mean, it's just that so true. She's that exceptional in my opinion, and I'm, of course, a little biased. But moving on, she's ready for me to stop talking about her. That was a very difficult season for us because she had to put that aside. And when it was time for that season to be over and she was able to do that, I was ready to sacrifice whatever. Yeah, I'll get out. I'll move everything out of my calendar. Anything that has to happen, if you want me to take a different job, I'll take a different job. Whatever, so that you could do your thing. And that was a beautiful, mutual, voluntary submission moment.
Now,
How about the old guys? Calling us babies over here. It's your turn.
Well, I'm the one that was called first.
That's exactly right.
And so, and because I was called first, we ended up going to what is now Southern Wesleyan University, transferring from Appalachian State to Southern Wesleyan. And I majored in youth and music ministry at the time. And he was going to do business, but because he was not really good at business math, I could be real honest.
I failed one of the classes. Thanks for sharing, babe.
He decided to, okay, I think I'll do this ministry thing. So he ended up because he was called, but he was fighting the call because of other circumstances that that kind of caused him to fear going into ministry. So, but anyway, so how does it feel? You.
I found that following is good for me, and no, she's not wrong. That is how that happened, and then you get the turn when we move here, and it's like.
But even then.
Yeah, I know.
Even then,
well, okay, y'all. No. We did a. It was supposed to be them out of control, not us. so I'm supposed to be driving this, but anyway, we met with the vice chairman in the dome over here, for our first interview back in 1998, and so we got in the car after it was all over with, and like she said, I think you immediately said, "We're moving here."
Well, I just knew if it was one of those things that if God met this need, because we had a financial need that we knew that in order to make this transition, it needs to at least be equivalent to what we're used to. And sure enough, it was. And I just had a peace. Even when we were traveling home, I'm like, and there was an excitement. And what you don't realize is my mom and dad had moved an hour to join us in ministry at the church we were at in Hickory. And so God had to move me first because I was sacrificing more. And there was an excitement. And it's just one of those things when the Holy Spirit calls you, he prepares you. And that's, and so I think God had to prepare me first. And then he eventually came along.
It's actually true. No. Let me say this another way. Jumping off of the way Theo and Silvana described it, God always, in our relationship, God may say to me where something's going to change. He may say that to me, but I have to wait. I have to wait until her heart changes. Now, there's two reasons for that. Number one is she has to be able to make that step. She has to be able to make that step before I do. I'm just being honest about it, okay? We're good. Okay. But there's a second reason, which is that's how the Holy Spirit leads us. I know, and we said early on, I'm gonna go past one of our questions. We said early on, if we ever disagreed, we would discuss everything, and we would only do things if we agreed on them. If the two of us didn't agree, we would just choose not to do whatever it was in front of us. And if we didn't agree and it had to be done, then I would make that choice because that just seemed to be the way it would work. Honestly, I can't think of many moments in our lives, I can't actually call up one right now, where that happened. And so literally, when we got back to North Carolina, she started packing and said, "You pray about it, let me know what you decide to do."
It was a little slower than that.
But God had moved her, so our life was going to change. Hey, let's jump into one. Y'all ready? Let's just get real. So what do you do? How do you practice mutual voluntary submission when one spouse has messed up, but both spouses have to live with the consequences? I got an even better one in just a minute. So how do you deal with that? Y'all, who wants to jump in first, or do you want us to jump in first? I've had more years to disappoint than you guys have. So go ahead.
I mean, we could talk about that. We could talk about the other uncomfortable sticking point. Like, what happens if both of you decide to do something and then one of you just suddenly isn't okay with it after you've already started, after everything's in motion? I could talk about that too, because we've had one of those scenarios for sure in our difficult transition. But man, yeah, we've messed up a bunch of different times in a bunch of different ways. With either could have been money, it could have been parenting, it could have been relationship. There's so many weird dynamics when you're married. Like I might have this couple that I really want to hang out with. and she might not like somebody in that, or she might have this couple that she wants to hang out with, and I might not like somebody in the couple, and we might not click. You know, it's not that we hate anybody, it's just that we might not click. We might not want to hang out, and those are difficult dynamics. And I've messed up by hearing her tell me, I really don't vibe with those people. And then I'm just over here like, hey, you should come over. You know, we should hang out. You know, yeah, she's fine. She's just not feeling well.
This is not good advice.
And then, you know, hey, babe, what's going on? Are you okay? And she's like, no, I'm not okay. And I'm like, what? I mean, this is going really well. Not for me, you know? And then later on that evening, have a discussion and, you know, realize that I had messed up. I hadn't listened. I hadn't put her first. It was about me, and it was about the relationships that I wanted to have, and made it more about those people because I wanted to make them feel valued or whatever. I wanted them to feel like they were important. And in so doing, devalued the most important person in my life. And had to learn that. And I can't say that I learned it the first time. Pretty boneheaded, pretty thick-headed sometimes with that. So that's one that comes to mind. You guys, you got something?
So a really practical example of one time that I made a mistake that we both had to live through. Some years ago, I had made the decision, I don't remember why, but made the decision that I wanted to take out a loan. And so I talked to the wife about it, said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I want to take out this loan, do this, and this. She said, okay, you know, what are your plans? What are you actually planning? I said, okay, well, I'm planning, and you know, this is how much we make, and as long as the loan falls into this category and we can pay this much back, we'll be done by this time. She's like, okay. When I talked to the lender, the loan actually came out to be a lot more monthly than what we had agreed on. And I'm sitting there on the phone, and he's like, we can make this happen today. All you gotta say is yes. And I'm thinking to myself, this is more than what Silvana and I had talked about. But I'm like, but I really wanna do this thing. So I said, yes, let's do it. And all I remember is when the bills started coming in, and Silvana said, what is this? And I said, well, remember I talked about taking that loan out? She said, yes, but this isn't what we talked about. And so to make a long story short, it was about 2 or 3 years that we both had to live through paying this bill. That's a really, really practical example. And the fix to that is simply communicate, I feel like, have the conversation, and then stick to what the two of you have decided. Like, if you've both been praying about it or thinking about it and you've come to this decision, as Pastor Mike was saying earlier, there was nothing stopping me from saying, hold up, I don't have to make this decision right now. Let me talk to my wife. We'll both come to a decision. But, you know, if I had done that, we would have been in a much better spot.
In 18 months in or so, did she sometimes, when you know, wanted to go out and do some shopping, and he had to say, no, babe, we can't remember the loan, were you like, yeah, the loan? Or like how did you handle that? Let's give some principles about how that might be helpful.
Oh yeah, that happened. Remember the time you...
Listen, I make a lot of tiny mistakes in our marriage, and so like when you're arguing about something, I'm like, do you remember this one big mistake that you made? And finally he was like, can you stop bringing that up, please? So I was not going to bring it up today, so if you wanted to volunteer, go ahead, but I was gonna be good.
Mike and Tina, you guys can bring the principal.
I don't know. You guys are too much fun.
I will say there was one time that Mike is a very generous person. And there was one time that...
I'm just not sure where this is going.
that he promised a church planter, I believe, that he would support him for a period of time. And it wasn't like $50. It was a few $100s. And normally we discuss those things.
Per month.
Per month, yes. And normally we discuss those kinds of things because, you know, he knows our finances. I don't deal with the finances. I used to deal with them early in our marriage, and then when I'd say, no, we can't do that, he wouldn't be happy about that. So, so I said, okay, you can have the finances. And so...
Remember, I'm not good at math.
So I'm just trusting him. He knows how much we have. He knows we can do that. But it wasn't so much, I didn't have a problem with it. The biggest problem I had was not given the opportunity to talk about it and make that decision together. I would have said yes. I would have probably asked some questions just to make sure we had the finances. And, you know, when God calls you to be generous, he always makes sure you're taken care of. So again, that wasn't the issue. The issue was not having that conversation. And I think in a lot of our decisions where we mess up is we go on our own and don't get the input of the spouse and just do our own things. And then we have to, you know, that whole saying, well, I'll ask for forgiveness and, you know, instead of permission. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times husbands feel like they have to get their wives' permission. But it's not so much the permission that wives want as much as we just want to be made a part of a decision. And so, anyway, I know he did not do anything intentional about that, but it was just one of those things that I wanted to be a part of that discussion.
Well, let me jump to a difficult spot, because I think in every marriage there comes this question: how do you process and continue to practice mutual voluntary submission when you see your spouse at their worst? And that's going to happen. You know, before you get married, your spouse can do no wrong, right? After you get married, they're capable. You know, so how do you process that? And I'll just jump in here. I've had moments where I've messed up, or I've done something wrong, or I've hurt her, or I've had moments where literally at the end of an argument or at the end of a moment or whatever had taken place, I'll look at her and I'll say, I've literally asked her before, how do you even sit and listen to me preach? Think about that, wives. What if your husband was the pastor and acted a fool? And then you had to sit on the front row on
Lots of forgiveness. Lots of forgiveness.
Because let's don't act like pastors don't mess up, and your wife doesn't have to sit on the front row and go, yes, Jesus. I mean, you know. So I've actually asked you that. I'll let you take it first.
Well, one of the things that I've learned, in some ways more so recently, there are moments when you're in any kind of leadership position, there's a lot of responsibility that people don't see. Responsibility, even the weight, you know, these guys carry the weight of staff and taking care of everybody. And so there's a lot of loneliness and you know, he doesn't have many people that he can confide in. Fortunately, God has given him a few friends that he walks with that he can confide in. And they see his issues too. But because
they are sworn to secrecy, do not ask them.
And we won't call any names. I know one person's in here. But anyway, and I'm very appreciative of those people. But and I was going somewhere with all of this, and got sidetracked. But I will say what I've learned is that a lot of times when he talks to me, I will say things trying to be helpful. He doesn't need me to fix it. He just needs me to listen. And so I'm learning.
Wait. How many of you heard that for the first time this direction? I need you to understand, I hear a lot of girls, especially young women, say, oh no, dudes don't think like that. Yes, they do. They won't let you know they think like that because you haven't given them permission. And they need to be men. When they're really just broken little boys. So, sorry.
So anyway, that's what I'm learning during this time, during those times when he's depressed or just really going through some things in his life that he can't really share with others, and I know, and just walking with him and listening is one of the things I've learned in this season.
I think also remembering that first and foremost, before calling, before job, before anything, you're a human. And like, we're just gonna have bad days. We're gonna make bad decisions. And that's what I have to keep bringing to the forefront of my mind is that even though this guy is a pastor, or even though your spouse is a government worker or a doctor or all of these important things, like they are a human first and foremost. And there's faults and there's failures in that. And you have to make room for those faults and failures. You have to be their support in those things. You've got to give them room to do that.
Yeah, that's in times where I've really struggled or had a period of time. Anybody have long stretches where you've just been depressed or stuck or couldn't figure out how to move forward and you're just unhappy? No one, just me. Okay. Thanks, guys. Thank you for the wave in the back. Appreciate you. I didn't want to be there. You know, you don't want to be there. It's not what you want, but nevertheless, that's where you are. And you're stuck, but you've got this amazing person that you're connected to. And what I saw Casey demonstrate in seasons like that was constant acceptance, unconditional acceptance, like just, I love you, and you're safe, and I've got you, and we're going to figure this out. Those sorts of statements, that sort of reassurance, the most helpful thing. Not problem solving, like you just said, you know, and that it was so helpful. And then the other thing that was helpful was speaking identity into me, calling the things that God says about me out of me, and helping me remember and see and catch vision for who I am. And that's a huge one that a lot of us don't think about. It's not like, you know, you're supposed to be this, that, not that kind of language in the way that she would do it. It was more of like, I see in you, you know, this version of yourself. And she would just say, I see in you, and you're strong, you're in control, you're powerful. All those things that I needed to hear in the moment that wasn't being lived out, that God says about me, she was reminding me of. And that was incredibly important. And then the other thing that I saw, and I'll let you guys talk in just a second, I'm sorry, was that she would just literally come alongside me and help whatever it was that I was struggling with in the moment. If there was a task, she would come arm in arm. And even if she had no clue, it was adorable sometimes. You know, she'd be like, I don't know what you're working on, but I'll just do it with you. And just knowing that she was there helped me get through too. So that applies to a lot of different situations, whether you've messed up or whether you're in a tough spot. You can do that for your spouse, and they can do that for you.
Kind of piggybacking off of what Pastor Dave just said, something that, as I said earlier, Solana's pretty easygoing. She bounces back quick. So if I'm having a bad day, she bounces back from my bad day pretty quickly. She loves me pretty well. She's good at, you know, coming to check on me even when I'm grumpy and don't want to be checked on. But I was the kid growing up that I would hold a grudge for hours because my parents punished me for something that was really slight, like really nothing at all. But Theo would think about it for hours. And so I'm the guy that it's a little bit easier for me to hold a grudge when things are happening. And something that helps me out is to remind myself, it's the frame of thought, as Pastor Dave was saying, the identity, speaking identity into each other. But something that helps me is before I even speak it into her is reminding myself that that's God's daughter. Like, I'm not allowed to treat her certain ways. No matter if she's having a bad day and she, quote unquote, deserves me to say this thing, you know, by society standards, or for me to give her the cold shoulder or this or that, I have to remind myself of her identity, that that's God's daughter, and I'm not allowed to treat her that way. And as God's son, I shouldn't have a motive to treat her that way. That's right. So that's one of the things that kind of helps me along in those rough patches.
I was just gonna say, I think for me, especially being pregnant, mainstream media will tell you, like, when you're pregnant or when you're going through this, you have every excuse to just act however you want to act. And I caught myself one time where I was like, I just want you to leave me alone. And then I realized, like, why am I like being so nasty and just thinking he can take it? He can take it. Because Theo is very introspective and he is pretty chill, but like, that's not an excuse for me to just think I can pile any kind of feeling that I'm having in the moment on him because he's not saying anything about it. So yeah, this has been a really, honestly, this current season has been a really like big heart check because of all the emotions and the hormones that you go through. It's just not letting that be an excuse to just dish all the ugly out on him and think he can, like, that he's fine because he hasn't said anything to me about his day. Obviously, his day was fine, and I can just dish and unload and think he can carry everything that I'm feeling on top of that, and then now you can leave me alone. Um, so just really kind of keeping that perspective of just because even if your spouse isn't one to always say anything to you, just because they aren't saying anything doesn't mean they aren't carrying a lot. And yeah, just because they can carry a heavier load doesn't give you an excuse to just keep unpacking your load on them and not dealing with your own things too.
So now that I have this opportunity, which I almost never have this opportunity, let me tell you a quick story and then wrap this up. Years ago, Tina and I went to our first roundtable in the West End churches when all the pastors of churches of 500 or more gathered together for a retreat to talk about, because it's different. The issues are different in larger churches. And so I'm sitting in the room for the first time with all of these men that I have watched my entire life who lead huge churches, and they're just heroes. And they're there with their spouses, and I'm looking around the room, and the Lord did something in my head, and I started to realize every one of these guys has a formidable spouse. And I was like, wow, those are strong women. And then I went, oh. No, that really happened. It almost happened just like that, where I realized, oh my God, she's as strong as all of them. And I have to tell you that that's the mark of any great leader, is a spouse that is beside them, men or women, a spouse that is beside them, who has all the formidability of being able to step in and do, but is willing to walk alongside. And when you find that, you found a treasure, and I can show you 3 of them right here. So, all right, guys, I think that's all we got time for right now. So if you want to come to the next service, I'll probably ask different questions. And so don't do that. It'll get crowded. But at any rate, all right, so let me let you guys go, and you're going to stay with me, okay? Because my wife is also the groups director here at New Life Church. And so here's how we would like to wrap up the service. I want to wrap up with prayer, but I'd like to ask all of the group leaders to come and join us down here. And Tina and I want to pray over you as we launch groups next week. So come on. Tell you what, everybody stand. Let's all stand so it's not awkward for these guys. Let's all stand. And if you're a group leader, come down. We want to pray over you right now. And I'd like to ask all of you to pray with us. Tina?
One thing is some of these group leaders are going to stay up front, and this week launches our group signups. And so I want you, if you're looking to join a group, these leaders are going to stay up front. Some of them have signs, and if you fit one of these groups and you're interested, I want you to come and talk to these leaders. We have some amazing leaders, and I can honestly say that I would join any one of these groups because they are so called, and they love people, and they want to serve others, and I feel so blessed to be a part of this team. Dear Jesus, we just thank you so much for what we've shared today. I pray that the things that we've shared today was beneficial to someone in here. Lord, we pray for our marriages, the world is trying to break our homes. But Lord, I just pray that you would use the things that we've shared to reinforce the godly principles we need to live by, to make our marriages stronger, to make our families stronger. Lord, today, right now, I pray over these leaders. I thank you so much for each and every person that has been called to lead. I pray that people will desire to grow in community, Lord. And Lord, that these groups would be so full that we're going to have to recruit more leaders. So, Lord, I just pray over these wonderful leaders, and that you would help them as they lead. Lord, I know the enemy will attack, but I pray against the enemy. I pray that they stand strong in their faith in you, and that they, as a leader, can lean on their group, their community, to continue to lift them up as well. We love you, Jesus. We thank you for this day. And Lord, I just pray that you get the glory for all that is done. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks for watching another inspiring message from the New Life team. We pray that the message you just heard inspires you to grow deeper in your love for God and for others. Here at New Life, that's why we exist. If you'd like to take a step to grow in that walk, click the link in the description and fill out the connection card. See you next time.